Right. So here we go. So we're going to talk about the unit circle today, and I'm actually going to break up today into two parts. The first part we're going to talk about points on the unit circle, and then the second half we're going to develop the Sweet 16 on the unit circle, which you guys also did last year in the Algebra 2. Okay? So, from recalling memory back to when we did the conic sections unit, okay, the equation of a circle is x minus h, quantity squared, plus y minus k, quantity squared, is equal to the radius squared. Well, the unit circle is a circle where the radius is equal to 1 and it's centered at the origin. So the equation of the unit circle is x squared plus y squared equals 1. Okay? That's the equation of the unit circle. Now, if I add in something called a t-axis, if I add in a t-axis, what I'm going to do then is I am going to set a t value. So from here all the way up to here is my value of t. And I'm going to wrap that t value around my unit circle. So if I wrap that t value around my unit circle, it goes out to probably about there, we'll say. Now, the things that I know about this, let's move this. Maybe I can't. Nope, this way. I just want that individual part. I don't want. That didn't work. So, when in doubt, delete it. Start over again. So here, my r is equal to 1. Still goes through the origin. Okay. But now this value here is also equal to t. And this angle here is theta. Right? Knowing what we know about arc length, we know that the arc length is equal to theta times the radius. Learned that in section 4.1. My radius is 1. And my arc length is t. Because I set it at that t value. So t here is going to equal theta. So the length of my arc is equal to theta. And that would go for any point on the unit circle, where the arc length is equal to theta. Okay. So each and every t value or rat value corresponds to an xy point on the circle. And my xy point would be right there. each t value also corresponds to a central angle theta, whose radian measure is t. Okay, because theta is equal to t. Okay. Now, because all of those measures, or all of those t values, are on the unit circle, we can find the 6 trigonometric functions for each and every one of them. Okay? But we should probably know what the 6 trigonometric functions are. First off, we have cosine. Okay? So the cosine of t, now I say it as the word cosine. I write it in shorthand as COS. The cosine of my RAP value is the x value, how far I go to get to that point on the circle. Okay? So I say it as cosine. I write it as COS, and it's equal to the x value. The cosine value is how far left or right, how far horizontally I have to get to that point. Okay? So it could be positive if I'm in quadrant 1 or 4. It could be negative if I'm in quadrants 2 or 3. The sine of t is how I say it, even though I write it as sint, okay, or sin of t. We're not in church, okay? We're in math class. So it's sine of t is equal to the y value, how far vertically I have to go to get to the point on the unit circle, be it up or be it down. So we've got sines and cosines. The tangent is defined as the sine of t divided by the cosine of t is how we define tangent. We write tangent as tan, and you're going to want to say tan, but it's not. It's tangent, and I will tell you that you're wrong every time you say tan. Okay? All right? Because this also isn't art class. Okay? So tangent in this case would be y divided by x. Now, everything, or those three are the main trigonometric functions. And they all have a co. Okay, they all have a co. Cosine has the co in it, so it gets paired with the one that doesn't have a co, which is secant. Secant is equal to 1 over, bring this down just a little bit, secant is equal to 1 over the cosine of t, which is the inverse of cosine, which is also the reciprocal of cosine. So if cosine is equal to x, then the secant, and we use, oops, that's a bad SEC. Then the secant is equal to 1 over x. So those two are paired. Cosine and secant are paired because they need to have a co in them. So sine then gets paired with cosecant because sine needs a co in it. So the cosecant is equal to 1 over the sine of t. So the cosecant, or the CSC of t, would be equal to 1 over y. Because that's how it is. What would you want it to be? COS, then it's cosine. You know what I mean? Okay, so we go CSC. Because we can't go COS, we can't go SEC, and I don't want to do ANT. You know what I mean? Okay, so it's CSC. Okay. Tangent is going to get paired with cotangent. So it's going to be 1 over the tangent of t, or cosine of t, over the sine of t. Cotangent is COT, and so that's going to be x over y. And for any point that's on the unit circle, we can utilize those relationships, or those, we can look at the x value or in the y value of the point to find the 6 trigonometric functions. So if it's on the unit circle, those work. If it's not on the unit circle, then those don't work. Okay? So the very first thing that you should do if you're given a point that's on a circle is you should determine if it's equal to, or if it's on, the unit circle. Okay? That's the very first thing that you should do. How are you going to determine if a point is on the unit circle? How am I going to determine if a point is on the unit circle? Nope. What's the equation of the unit circle? The easy one, because it's the unit circle. X squared plus y squared equals 1. So you take the x part of the point, square it, take the y part of the point, square it, add them together, and if it's 1, that point is on the unit circle, and then we can go through and figure out the 6 trig values for it. Okay? Well, in this case, that would be the square root, or excuse me, negative 5/13 I would have to square. Negative 12/13 I would have to square. And add those two together, and that should be equal to 1. Okay? Now, we don't need no stinking calculators today. We can do this in our head. What's negative 5 times negative 5? 25. What's 13 squared? 169. What's negative 12 squared? 144. What's 25 plus 144? 169, right? And what's 169 divided by 169? 1. So is this point on the unit circle? Yes, this point is on the unit circle. So now let's find our sine, our cosine, and our tangent, because then we can very easily find the other ones. So the sine of t is going to be what? What's the sine of this point? Negative 12/13. What is the cosine of this point? Negative 5/13. Sine is y, cosine is x. Oops, I guess I forgot to. Oops. What is the tangent of t? Do we get that one directly, or do we have to do some figuring first? Probably want to do a little bit of figuring first. Tangent is equal to y over x, correct? Which in this case it would be negative 12/13 divided by negative 5/13. Yes? Okay. Now, if there's one thing that I love, it's fractions. If there's 5 things that I love, it's fractions, my 2 kids, my wife, and math. Okay? All right? Do I love fractions in fractions? No. Do I love decimals in fractions? No. Those are both naughty. Okay? And especially don't like fraction in a fraction in a fraction. I have 2 fractions going on in here, right? So, let's take a trip back down memory lane, all the way back to 4th grade. I had Mrs. Wyman. Who did you have? 4th grade? Yeah, 4th grade. Okay. I had Mrs. Wyman. Okay. Isn't it crazy how you remember all of your, like, I could probably, if it took me a while, I could probably go back through my high school teachers. I don't think I could do, I probably could though. Junior high. But elementaries, I can name, I can rattle them off, Okay? Okay? So, Mrs. Hoyman taught me that when you're dividing fractions, what do you do with the bottom one? You flip it, and then you multiply. So this is really negative 12/13 times 13 over negative 5. Right? Which simplifies to be what? Even farther it simplifies to be what? Go ahead, Cole.
I wasn't about to say anything.
Oh, it looked like you were ready to say 12/5. Because why would I go negative 12 over negative 5? True. Okay. So this simplifies to be 12/5. So the tangent of t is 12/5. Now, that's half of our answers. Because I got to give the other 3. Which co goes with sine? Secant goes with sine? That neither one of them have a co. What do you got to listen? Cosecant goes with sine, because they all have to have a co. So what is cosecant? Is the inverse of sine, yes? Or in fractions, which is what we're talking here, what's the inverse of a fraction? It's an R word. Reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of negative 12/13? Negative 13/12. So the cosecant here is negative 13/12. What's the one paired with cosine? Secant. So the secant of t is equal to what? Negative 13/5. What's paired with tangent? Cotangent. What's the cotangent of t? 5/12. And there, we've now found all 6 trig values for the point negative 5/13, negative 12/13. Okay?